Hello, welcome to another episode of Leadership Synergized. And as you can see, we're so blessed and honored to have Lieutenant Colonel Adam Blanton back with us again this week. I hope, and if you haven't had the opportunity, I very much encourage you to view last week's episode and session with Lieutenant Colonel Blanton, who's in the midst of a major life transition. After 23 years of military career in the Marines, he's stepping into the civilian world. And in the midst of that transition at this present time, Lieutenant Colonel Blanton is working to identify just what that next step in his career looks like. And Lieutenant Colonel Blanton, thank you so much for joining us again, my friend.
Thanks, Kevin. It's good to be back again.
Yeah, we were, after the last episode, we were talking a bit about the adjustment, some things that during your transition you've worked to understand, but yet to implement. Talk a little bit about that.
It's very interesting. I think that in terms of skill sets, because if folks go back and look at the last episode, I mentioned a number of programs that I've gone through or are still in that are helping with that. And obviously you have to get pretty creative in describing your skill sets as you build out your resume and do your cover letters and all of these other things. And there's some that I think are a lot of these soft skills that are probably greater that are hard to articulate. Flexibility, adaptability, listening, critical thinking, these things that have been instilled in me from the very beginning of my career. And not just that it was there, but a number of schools that the military has paid a lot of money to send me to get good at those things, how to be a strategist, how to understand strategic thinking, planning, doing a lot of those things that just don't. I'm not an IT guy, right? I don't know how to program or do those things because that's not where, at least, especially near the later part of my career, that's not where the military has wanted me. They've wanted me for my mind and the way I can think and the way I can write in order to articulate positions and then not just write the paper, but be convincing on how that's delivered to somebody. That's hard, especially in today's world where you have a generation that probably of no fault of their own, they haven't been given the opportunities to interact with folks in the same way or develop those writing skills the same way and be as persuasive in how they interact with folks. So that's that sort of piece of what it is. And I think that's where you get into that. I think another one that folks might discount or they think about it in just the way their industry focuses on it is risk management and mitigation, understanding what risk is, and then understanding that there's ability to make decisions with knowing the risk. You're not risk adverse. It's just understanding the risk so you know how to mitigate it down and then execute whatever it is you're going to do, knowing what the ramifications could be if something does go wrong. And then being able to have those plans in place so that if it does, it's a little bit of an easier problem to deal with than if you had not done that as one of those skill sets. I'll probably leave it at there at the moment. Maybe you'll tease some more out of me as we continue the conversation.
So thank you. Great sharing in that regard. Lieutenant Colonel, you talked about a moment ago in your response about the opportunities the military's provided you for growth, for development in that aspect. As Lieutenant Colonel Blanton becomes Adam Blanton in whatever industrial field that is next, how does Adam Blanton go forward and serve self to grow your value and increase that growth, if you will, that you're going to bring others?
I talk to a lot of people on what their journeys have been and what the industries are as I do that whole piece. And that's useful. A number of the organizations that I've done, they're real big fans of, hey, try to get that 150, 100,000 cups of coffee with folks and just keep, not just for networking, but just, it's just education, being a learner. It's one of my strengths that I found out, which wasn't quite surprising based on how much I liked going to school, that at least later in life, that you have to constantly be learning and allow yourself to grow. I think folks discount the idea that there's so much to learn from books. It's startling to me to a certain extent how many folks get like their news from TikTok and it's just TikTok or it's just some social media platform. There's no diving in to like really figure out like what the news source is. And I don't want to go down that path a whole lot, but I find myself going back to read things. And I don't just read. I do my very best to tab and underline and take notes about where it is. And I constantly find myself going back to ancient wisdom, the Stoics. So I have Marcus Aurelius's Meditations tabbed up completely and underlined with those things that just, when I read it the first time, what jumped out at me, and I keep going back to them and going, oh, here's another one. It's applicable to my life today, to try to figure it out. It's like I mentioned before, but like listening, like I just opened up a page here, and one of his things was practice really hearing what people say. Do your best to get in their minds. And it's to understand, if you want to go down that route, that's almost, if you want to, you can pull that into John Boyd and the OODA loop on how you observe and orient, decide and act. And if you're changing your orientations and walking that mile in someone else's shoes and really trying to figure it out, that builds a relationship that you're going to have. And knowing that, it helps in that transition piece. So there's just so much out there to not take it from your own perspective and take it from someone else's perspective. So there's a lot of it's been going on, especially now in these past several months of reading the books that are trying to help me, that are not just old ones like meditations, books like Designing Your Life, if you're taking like a designed elements aspect of how you want to do it, or The Stoic Transitions, another book that's out there that I read through that pulls from ancient philosophy to get after. So it's trying to just do that, I find, has been very helpful on growing myself, to know that there's someone's treading these paths before. I'm sure some of your listeners are familiar with Secretary of Defense Mattis. In our circles for the Marine Corps, he's the Stoic monk, just recently got married. Before that, just a heavy reader. Because in those books, he could have fought thousands of battles in his mind before he ever actually had to. And so it grows you when you do that. But pick that with any industry or whatever you're going to do. Read and immerse all that knowledge, and you can be a sponge. And it makes things so much easier with things.
Great advice, Lieutenant Colonel. You've talked about your strengths in the last episode, and you alluded to them again. And I believe you've completed the Gallup Strengths Finder, if you will. What are your top strengths?
Yeah, my top 5 are restorative. I mentioned my number 2 as a learner. I'm an includer, a developer, and then individualization.
How have you found those to relate to who Adam Blanton knew of himself prior to taking the strength assessment?
It's been very interesting. A lot of those, they lined up pretty good, that not knowing them in terms of, at least earlier on in life, I was a much more of an extrovert. I think most folks, as they get older, become more introverted. They're just a little bit tired of people at times. And that ebbs and flows based on my energy levels and everything. But I think that the includer portions of that, like, really came out. While I didn't necessarily enjoy high school, once I got to college and doing my higher level education, I really found a lot of enjoyment in doing that and reading those things, and then expanding my knowledge past that into other areas of interest. Like, I have books on Stoic philosophy. I have books on technology. I have obviously probably a lot of military history, but cooking, critical thinking, systems thinking, like all this stuff is there to I always want to try to learn as much as I can to just better myself on that. I had a lot of enjoyment in one of my job sets, where being stationed in not one of the most pleasant places in the world, 29 Palms, California. If anyone's gone there, it's a bunch of desert, not a whole lot that's out there, but great training venue to do a lot of good live fire training. I was part of an organization that during the time I was there was helping to certify units to get ready to go to combat. So you would get these organizations in with teams that might have just been being formed, and you have to start running them through their paces to get them certified. There was a lot of joy in like watching that growth development as they progress from JV to highly elite where they were at. And some frustrations when some folks didn't perform as well, or their uphill climb was not as steep in terms of learning and success as other ones. That's natural. That's personalities and how those teams are functioning together, and leadership inside the command. And you can't control that as the person that's doing the training and the evaluating. That's for them to figure some of those things out. But you give them the tips and the tricks and things to make that work. But while it was a long, arduous 300-ish days a year in the field, training, long hours, exhaustion, it was probably one of the best jobs I had, because there was that aspect of seeing growth from other humans to get good at their trade. That was enjoyable. I felt like, as I go back and look and seeing the Gallup strengths come out me, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. Of course, that makes sense. How do I funnel this now into something that is real world that I can do? But a lot of those are also those soft skills that don't translate very well onto a resume. That's the challenge when trying to do that, which that just goes back full circle. You got to get that network. You got to get yourself in front of someone and talk to them. That's not necessarily a recruiter, it's a decision maker that can actually, who has hiring authority that goes, you know what? We'll train you on the things you need. We want you because of all of these other intangibles that are not coming. I am completely amazed at the number of corporations and industries and people that within the first couple things of talking with vets, they're like, we like you guys because you come to work on time. That apparently is a problem in the world.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting.
I'm like, so that should be at the top of the list. I can get to work on time, dressed appropriately and ready to do my job. It's interesting for all of that. But yeah, the strengths has been very helpful. And I keep pulling them out and looking at them and how do I incorporate those and where does it fit for everything?
Excellent. Lieutenant Colonel, as we head down the home stretch with this episode, you've talked a lot, you've presented a lot of leadership skill sets, and Dr. John Maxwell says leadership is influence, no more, no less. When you think of influence, which happens to represent the middle letter and still the I piece, describe Adam Blanton as a leader going forward and what you bring to an organization through your philosophy, your approach, and what allows you to be successful for the company that's in your future, for Adam Blanton and the people Adam Blanton will serve.
I think someone else asked me this question before a little bit, and I think what it, at least for me personally, is I start with trust. If I don't know you, there's no reason for me not to trust you, right? I'm going to start with that so that you're going to have to prove to me that you are untrustworthy. Even if there's a reputation that came from someone else to like, watch out for that guy, that could be a personality issue with those two individuals and really has nothing to do with me. I'm going to start with trust. I also try my best to lead with kindness in terms of who I'm talking to. If folks haven't figured this out yet, no matter what industry you are in, military, IT, sales, in real estate, any of that stuff, the world is a people business and you got to interact with people. And so being kind is one of those things that everyone should start with. You can catch a lot more flies with honey on doing stuff. So I think that goes a long way. And that doesn't mean that like in my military career that I was a pushover. There's standards. You have to adhere to the standards. And even though there's a rule book, anyone can tell you from talking to a recruiter that everything is waiverable to get you into the, there's always a loophole or a way around to solve that problem because things happen in people's lives that they need grace for in order to make their life a little bit easier. We don't have to be hard on everything. What's the situation? It's always different as to what happens. And it's worthwhile for us to listen to that and put it in context of what's going on and know that some of your decisions, while some folks might scoff at me and say that's probably not the right attitude, but sometimes your decisions are going to have inconsistency because we don't have cookie cutter people that work for us. They all have differing things going on in their lives. Some are married, some are divorced, some just lost parents. They have multiple kids. Their kids have problems, whether they're autistic or learning disabilities or other things that are going on inside them. These multi-generational households living together that adds all this extra complexity to what goes on in this person's life, that you have to get in touch with what that is in order to lead them better. And if you can't do that, then, and you're just going to say policy X, Y, and Z and regulation 1, 2, 3, dot A, bravo, isn't going to fit every single one of those. Trust first, lead with kindness, listen to people, try to get to know them beyond what their sock size is, like what are the things that are really going on in their lives, so that when you start making decisions, you at least have that context. And then be upfront with them. Hey, sometimes I'm going to make decisions you don't like because it's for the betterment of the entire organization. That's just one of those things. As an aside, this is me being more of a follower, but in one of my jobs as an operations officer, we would get lots of taskings from our higher headquarters to do stuff, which are not fun things to do sometimes. Hey, we need a Humvee for a parade, or we need a this for that, or a blah, blah. It's a suck on manpower, it's a suck on resources, it's all this stuff. If I looked at my schedule and we can support, I always said yes. I'm going to be a team player and I'm going to say yes. And they knew that, and I didn't gripe or grumble about it. I briefed my boss. I said, I'm saying yes to this. It's good for us, all those other things. What I did is I built a giant bank with my higher headquarters about me being a team player, so that when I came back and I had to say no, they knew it was a legit no. There's no schlip. I got nothing left. And that helped. I had my higher headquarters bosses be like, you're the only one that does this. And I'm like, I'll tell you, it just seems like the right thing to do. It worked, you know? And I bought a lot of WASTA and a lot of tokens. And that way, when even higher up commanders say, hey, we need this or we need this, and I say, I can't do both. I can do this or I can do this. If I try to do both, you're going to get something. It's not going to be good, and it's not going to help anyone along the line. We won't get training. You won't get trained. Pick one or the other. All right, Blanton, I hate you, but we need you to do this one. Roger that, sir. Moving out. And we get written out of the orders for the other thing, and we get new orders for the next thing. But that doesn't work unless you've been open about the entire thing and listened and been a team player as best you could. I'm not the greatest leader in the world. We all make mistakes. You have to learn from the mistakes. And I think that's the other aspect, is don't think you're perfect. Take your blows with a grain of salt, learn from them, and hopefully you'll have people that when they do knock you down and they help pick you back up, they tell you how you can get better. That's been one of my struggles, not necessarily telling people that, but I've ran into a number of leaders, very few who have sat me down and said, hey, you could do better with this, or you may not know this, but you had this particular trait that's coming out and it's off-putting. And so you're the first person to tell me that. Thank you. Let me see if I can work on that. Why wasn't someone saying that 15 years ago to help me out? So those leaders are rare. It seems like that because we're all busy to be able to sit down and have that conversation. Mm-hmm. I did it just a couple of weeks ago. One of my former subordinates, he's at a military school right now, and he's going through his own transition in terms of, hey, he's about to get orders to somewhere new. He's got options. He's got some options. And he called me and says, what's the best advice you have? I have this goal in mind. So what job sets me up? And we had to have a conversation. What sounds interesting was one job sounds interesting, but it's not a good pathway to get to his ultimate goal. So the pathway to get to his ultimate goal means he probably needs to take a job overseas to be the job that is going to help guide that pathway by something that he probably really enjoys doing. He's got to make that choice. Do you want to do something that's really interesting to you and fun that might not lead you somewhere? Or are you going to go to another place where it's going to be a lot of hard work, still probably interesting for you, and no guarantees you're going to get what you want, but it's the best pathway forward, and trying to have that conversation. And it wasn't just a conversation with me and him. He put his wife on speaker. We talked too. So it's a family decision that's got to happen. I've watched other friends of mine in making decisions who are very religious. Not that I'm not religious, but they are really religious in good sense, really great friend. Their family had choices too. And they got around the table together as a family and prayed about it on where they were going to go. Where did they see their life? They're in Guam. That's where they all wanted to go. But everyone does it differently for some of those things. I know that's like how you're making decisions, but they're incorporating folks. It's not just a you thing. They're bringing people into it that it's going to affect to try to help make the right ones with it. So that's my 2 cents as a way to go about doing that. Well, and I'm sure there's a lot of way more successful leaders who don't follow this pathway and have a different mindset on where it is.
Much more valuable than 2 cents, my friend. And as we come to a close, let me just ask, because you've provided what I consider to be a very strong and solid leadership toolbox to offer whomever in that regard. And I congratulate you on that. Thank you so much for your service, and God bless you. I sense the development and this very positively, the maturation of a career and a process in life that you've been focused with. I know there's a lot more significance and greater things to come for you and whomever you have a chance to serve, organization and people. How does someone get a hold of you who may be watching this to learn more about Adam Blanton?
LinkedIn is probably the best way to find me for that. And what I'll probably do is I'll make sure you have that. So probably at the bottom of your thing, you can here's a clickable link or something like that. That's the best way in order to message me and everything. You can see where I've been and what I've done for that. I'm active on there in terms of I'm looking at what's out there and everything else. I don't necessarily post a whole lot, but I do comment on folks' posts and everything. I try to limit that at the moment while I'm still on active duty until I'm like out in the world and don't have to worry about it too much more with that. That's the best way to get a hold of me at the moment, is on my LinkedIn profile for stuff. And then if you're there, I'm happy to engage and connect. And if you're in the greater Tampa Bay area, you can sit down and have a cup of coffee and talk about everything from Clausewitz to their latest Star Wars film or whatever.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Hey, Lieutenant Colonel Blanton, God bless you again. Appreciate your time and the words of wisdom and what you've shared from the experiences and planning for success through transition and just what's worked for you. And I know there's much value there that others who are viewing, watching now, or who will in the future are going to pick up from that. I certainly know I've learned a great deal through these 2 episodes. So thank you, my friend.
You're very welcome. And it's a two-way street. And the questions are very insightful to me, and it helps me distill what's in my mind because it's a jumble at times with everything going on. This has been incredibly useful. If any other opportunities pop up like this, I'm happy to come back on or engage with other folks you think need some time to just chit chat and pull their own ideas out.
Oh, absolutely. I've got a list of some individuals I'm going to share this experience with, and you and I will get back together because I want to, the last topic you talked about and the ability to provide effective, relevant, timely feedback that really is meaningful and absorb that feedback is something I'm studying because I don't think it's naturally there in everyone. And you just hit there. I think there's another opportunity for you and I to come back and build on that because leaders need that. I need that. Hey, I'm the first to admit I have failed there a lot in my career, and I want to learn more about that. I will be reaching out to schedule that for us.
Yeah, I think as one last little thing I think on that topic is I think at least in the military and maybe even in other organizations, you reach a certain level, whatever that is, lieutenant colonel, colonel, general, and on your enlisted side, your sergeant majors, your first sergeants, that folks think, oh, you're a senior leader. You don't need help. You don't have you don't need guidance. But you know what? We all do. The highest general up there, General Brown, who's now the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, like he still has a boss that has to tell him something about how to do his job better. And they also need to come and check in and say, are you doing okay? The Marine Corps Commandant right now is in the hospital because he had a heart attack because he was trying to do the Assistant Commandant's job and the Commandant's job.
Oh my. Just
because of things that are going on in the world. And it's highly stressful. And I wonder if anyone came and checked, are you doing okay, sir? To just make sure that we got to protect our senior leaders all the way down to our junior Marines. Mental health is huge on all of that piece. And it doesn't just affect the youngest soldiers or airmen or Marines or sailors or Coast Guardsmen or Guardians. There's a plethora of these services now, right? But it goes all the way to the top. So everyone needs to check back in, not for just mental health and just physical well-being, but how are they doing? Are there things we can improve? I think at the end of the day, all of us just want to be useful and do the best job we can. And we need that feedback on, can you do it like this? Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I can do that. And I'll readjust those things. So I'll stop there.
No, I appreciate that. A lot to build on. And as we close, I encourage anyone and everyone, if you've got feedback to offer or you want feedback, don't hesitate. Just reach out. It's up to you to determine, or the other individual, the value of that piece. And it doesn't have to be something that impacts you right that second. Take the time to reflect. Take the time to understand. Use your strengths. Lieutenant Colonel, God bless you for your service. God bless you for you. And I'm here just as other listeners are, viewers. So much respect. We're here to help. Anything we can do for you. Until we meet again, my friend, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for all you've brought to us during these episodes.
Thank you, Kevin. This was a great experience.
Thank you again. And thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you. On behalf of Lieutenant Colonel Blanton, remember, take a moment, be still, reflect, decide the next step, then take the next step. God bless you. I appreciate you.